Welcome everyone to our discussion on caffeine, your health, performance, and everything that you need to know about it. We're going to address some frequently asked questions that I often get discussed and asked about in my daily life about caffeine, coffee consumption. What are the right amounts for you? What are some potential health benefits? Of course, what are some potential risks? And even along the lines of if coffee, caffeine, and those different supplements can help you with your weight loss goals. So we have a lot to cover today. So hopefully this gives you some good insight to either use caffeine in your daily life or potentially not use caffeine or coffee or those different types of things in our daily life. I also want to mention too, we are going to talk about some good sources of caffeine other than coffee in this podcast as well. So we'll go ahead and get started. Before we begin, please consider liking the video as this greatly helps to spread the message of inclusive fitness to individuals of all abilities and just get some good health information and knowledge out to the overall public. So to begin our discussion on caffeine and your overall health, I really wanted to begin talking about just caffeine and its potential negative effects, right? I think this is a really good point to start. So, is caffeine really bad for you? Before we begin, I wanted to give kind of a little bit of context of what caffeine is. Caffeine in itself is essentially a stimulant drug. So a lot of people don't really consider caffeine as a drug. Well, caffeine actually is a drug, and it's a stimulant drug. And what that means is that it basically kind of revs up your central nervous system to make you more alert, make you more focused, and a lot of people know this. But with that said, some people don't know or realize that it is actually considered a drug. So that is something I wanted to preface. In addition to this, about 80% of US adults consume caffeine, usually from coffee sources, but some type of caffeine daily. That's a pretty high percentage. I would assume this is pretty standard across the world as caffeine is widely available to a large amount of individuals. It's also very cheap, so even in quote unquote non-developed countries, you can still get caffeine pretty widely available. And I also too want to mention that when I'm talking about caffeine in the context of the rest of this podcast and the rest of this little clip, caffeine and coffee often are very correlated, as in a lot of the data is done on coffee drinkers just because a lot of people drink coffee and it has caffeine in it. But with that said, there are some health benefits to drinking coffee independent of the caffeine in it. So basically that's kind of a preface of there might be a little correlation versus causation here. And that's kind of one of the big things with a lot of this research. It'd be nice if it was strictly done in just caffeine, but unfortunately a lot of it is tied to coffee consumption, which usually has caffeine, unless you're drinking decaf, of course. So with those things said, what are some side effects of drinking caffeine or coffee? Let's just look at caffeine though. So one of the things that people often note is sleep disturbances. And this is probably one of the biggest things. And a lot of times people will even say to me too, like, Logan, I can drink some coffee right before I go to bed and I'm completely fine. I don't feel like I'm, tired at all the next day or whatever. I can fall asleep fine. This may be true, but unfortunately, when you drink caffeine, it can actually mess with your sleep quality. So you may be getting to sleep and you may be in bed for a certain amount of time, but your overall sleep quality will be greatly detrimented, right? So basically what that means is that you're not going to be able to repair or have the most restorative sleep that you could if you didn't ingest caffeine prior to going to bed. And we'll talk a little bit later about how long caffeine can actually stay in your system, as this will kind of give you a good ballpark of when you maybe should stop drinking coffee or caffeine. But that's a big thing. Also too, a lot of people will drink caffeine throughout the day to get them by, which then makes them more tired, which will then make them, of course, have kind of worse sleep. So it's this never-ending cycle of, I'm drinking coffee to get me through the day, but I might drink it too late in the day, so then I'm going to fall asleep and have poor sleep. Then when I have poor sleep, I'm going to be tired, so then the next day, you get the gist. Caffeine can have some sleep disturbances. In addition to this, you could have some energy fluctuations throughout the day. If you drink caffeine too early in the day, this actually messes with your body's ability to get rid of adenosine, which is something that kind of makes you sleepy and tired. And if you have it too early in the day, this is usually when people wake up, they drink a bunch of coffee, and that's like maybe 30 minutes or an hour after waking. And then they have that crash later in the day. This crash is the adenosine actually showing up in your body because you weren't able to clear it, because that caffeine actually kind of blunts adenosine clearing from the body. So energy fluctuations, especially if you're drinking it right early in the day, simply because that adenosine clearing. In addition to this, caffeine is a diuretic, as it can dehydrate you. With that said though, this is usually if you are just taking caffeine in like a pill form or a supplement form. If you are drinking caffeine that's, literally drinking caffeine, if you are taking caffeine in a drink such as coffee, tea, or maybe even an energy drink, this doesn't really have the same effects of dehydrating you because you are actually taking some fluids in with that. It's really just kind of a issue if you are just taking it in that pill form, which is really where you could get in some trouble. So if you are taking it with a pill, you can get it in pills. Try to drink something with it. Have 16 ounces of water, maybe even a little bit more. This can kind of counteract some of those negative health benefits of being dehydrated when drinking caffeine. Also too, some people will start to build up a tolerance and dependency on caffeine, where this can kind of get some addictive properties. Caffeine isn't fully addictive, but you know, a lot of people might feel like, I need my coffee to wake up in the morning, or I need some caffeine to wake up or go to the gym or all these things. And although it does have its time and place, you know, if you are saying to yourself, hey, I need this, that's where you can get into some issues with kind of your verbiage and your thoughts around overall caffeine consumption. You can start to build some dependency, which of course would be considered a negative in most lights. Also too, caffeine can increase your anxiety. As we discussed at the beginning of this, it is a stimulant drug. And anytime your central nervous system is being stimulated, heightened, or you're becoming more aroused, this can increase your overall alertness, but also alertness and anxiety, kind of the same thing. You're very focused, you're looking around, you're anxious and kind of alert at the same time. So if you are somebody who is, dealing with anxiety, always has issues with anxiety, maybe you're taking anti-anxiety medication, or you just had issues with anxiety in the past, caffeine can kind of increase that central nervous system alertness, which of course will potentially increase your overall anxiety. So if you are, I shouldn't say anxiety sensitive, but if you are somebody who deals with having kind of poor anxiety control throughout your life, caffeine 100% will not help with that at all. And if you are somebody who has very bad panic attacks, I would highly recommend, from my personal opinion, caffeine might not be the best thing for you to take in large quantities, or maybe at all. In addition to this, if you are somebody who has heart issues, since we did discuss it is a stimulant drug, a stimulant can kind of raise your autonomic nervous system, which basically wakes you up a little bit. And when this happens, it can increase your overall heart rate a little bit and put a lot of stress on the heart. A lot of these adaptations do kind of subside very quickly, and what I mean by that is usually in habitual caffeine intake, people who take it all the time, they don't really notice this kind of heart rate increase. So If you are somebody who hasn't done caffeine for a while and you have heart issues and you are just taking a bunch, there could be some potential complications. But if you're taking kind of a low dose of caffeine, or even kind of gradually go into it a little more, you probably won't have too many heart issues or really need to concern yourself about this as well. In addition to this, if you are somebody who is pregnant, it might be a good idea to kind of monitor your overall intake of caffeine, as this can affect the baby during the actual development of the baby. So then when it's born, there could be some potential issues. With that said, though, there is some kind of emerging research on this. You don't need to fully forgo coffee, but trying to stick to maybe about 100 to 150 milligrams per day. And again, this is going to depend on the individual. I would highly recommend talking to your doctor about it, because your weight is going to be kind of indicative of this. Everyone is a little caffeine tolerant, so whoever you're going to see for your overall baby health, if you are watching this and you are currently pregnant or know somebody who's pregnant, something you would definitely want to consider talking to your baby doctor about. One of the other things too that happens a lot with coffee or caffeine is people get some GI distress. And this GI distress actually is somewhat of a good thing, and we'll discuss later in the podcast why coffee actually makes you poop. But there might be some GI distress when you consume it. You might notice, you feel like you need to go, and this is just something to consider. But also too, I wouldn't say this is a bad thing, especially if coffee or caffeine is making you go. That can help to keep you a little bit regular. So kind of a negative, but also a negative that could lead into a positive, because of course you don't want to just be blocked up and constipated all day. And caffeine can actually help kind of get rid of that. If you are somebody who has seizures, or somebody who has seizures, since, as we discussed at the beginning, caffeine is a stimulant drug, this can increase the chances of seizures happening. So usually a lot of times individuals who have any type of seizures, it's recommended to kind of forego caffeine consumption altogether. Maybe you can get away with a little bit of, again, this is going to be something you'd want to talk to a dietitian about, and potentially whoever's prescribing you the seizure medication. If you are taking seizure medication, I would talk to them as well. But just something to consider. When it comes to the overall time caffeine is in your body, we use a term called half-life. And half-life is essentially how long it takes for about half of the dose of whatever you take. And this could be food. In this case, we're talking about caffeine. Half-life is how long it takes for half of that overall dose to be out of your body. So usually when we're talking about caffeine, we're talking about a milligram dose. So let's say you have 100 milligrams of caffeine at noon. 6 hours later, or at 6 p.m., you would have 50 milligrams of caffeine still in your system. The crazy thing about this is that means that the quarter life is 12 hours. So at midnight, when you're about to go to sleep, if you consumed 100 milligrams of caffeine at noon, you will still have 25 milligrams of caffeine in your body. And I think that's pretty insane, and something that a lot of people don't realize when they're starting to intake more caffeine in their daily life. For most individuals, moderate intake is okay. It's going to be highly individualized. Some people are more caffeine tolerant. They can take more caffeine. They can quote unquote withstand more caffeine. I feel like I'm pretty caffeine tolerant for the most part. It takes a lot to kind of have me feel that buzz. There's other people who they take, maybe just one cup of tea and they feel buzz, they feel energy. These are the same people who might have some anxiety issues, so they're just very caffeine sensitive. This is something that you'll have to play around with yourself and really find out what actually works the best for you, what's too much, what's too little, and there's going to be a lot of individualized preference. with habitual caffeine use, you may notice some small decline in overall perception of how well it works. So you might feel like you need a little bit more. When we're talking about how long it takes to kind of get back to baseline, usually it's about 1 week. Again, this is going to depend on how much caffeine you're taking, how sensitive you are. Really, it's very individualized. But overall, caffeine, not the worst thing. There could be some potential huge health issues with chronic use of caffeine. And that's the big thing I want to reiterate to all of you who are watching. The next portion of this I wanted to discuss is kind of what are the benefits of caffeine. So we just listed off a long amount of things that are bad with caffeine, but what are some of the good things that caffeine can bring us? And there is some good news, but I do want to kind of preface again, there is a difference between coffee and caffeine. Coffee in itself, unless it's decaffeinated, does have caffeine in it. But most of the research done on the overall complacency of caffeine on our overall health has been done in people who drink coffee, and coffee actually has health benefits that are independent of caffeine. So this causes some issues on knowing, is it the caffeine that might be giving me this health benefit, or is it the coffee versus caffeine? With that said though, a lot of the stuff on overall alertness and feelings of vigor does come from caffeine. Some of the other health benefits on longevity might be more steered towards coffee, but I just wanted to kind of preface that a lot of the research on what this does for us is done in coffee. So again, the benefits are user dependent, and some people might get these benefits from drinking just a little bit of coffee. Some people are going to need a lot of caffeine or coffee. And the first benefit I wanted to throw out there, and this is going to shock some people, is actually improved sleep. And you might be thinking, what in the world, Logan? Like, no way. I've heard that caffeine is terrible for my sleep. And it could be. But if you time caffeine at the right dose during the day, it actually can help you sleep. Caffeine can actually raise your cortisol level. And cortisol is what we know as a stress hormone. In the morning, your body releases a lot of cortisol to help you wake up and become more alert and get your day ready. And caffeine can actually help to raise cortisol. There is a little bit of a trick though, because you don't want to intake it too early in the day, because drinking caffeine too early will block the release of adenosine from your body. Adenosine is the thing that makes you tired. So if you're blocking adenosine, you're going to feel more alert. But once that caffeine subsides, the adenosine is going to come back in your body. It hasn't fully cleared. You're going to feel tired. So I usually wait about an hour to two, usually about actually 90 minutes to 2 hours after I wake up to intake some coffee. And this will help to really spike my cortisol all the way up. And this will help to spike anyone's cortisol. So you can get that alertness, and then you can have some pretty good energy throughout the day. Once your cortisol is high, especially at the beginning, this can really help your ultimate circadian rhythm or your body clock to kind of tell you that, hey, this is when I'm alert. And then later in the day, that cortisol is going to slowly lower because you spiked it really high right in the morning with the assistance of coffee and some other things you could do. Bright light's a great one, specifically sunlight. But this is how it can actually improve your overall sleep. Another thing that caffeine can do for you is increase your physical performance. A lot of people know this. This is probably one of the most used ergogenic aids, which basically means that it can help improve different aspects of mental and physical performance. A lot of the studies on this have actually been done in endurance training and power output. So producing the most amount of power, or basically speed, in kind of bike races is one that I know off the top of my head that they have a lot of research on. But with that said, it can also increase your performance by decreasing the overall perception of being tired. And as we discussed, this happens because caffeine blocks those adenosine receptors from your body. So those adenosine receptors are what makes us feel tired. So once it's blocked, you're going to feel a little more alert, a little more energetic, specifically because of that caffeine. So if you're going into the gym, for example, it could increase your physical performance because not only does it actually help to kind of improve the overall calcium release of into your muscles. So calcium and different types of electrolytes we need to be dumped into our muscles to help us get them to fire better. This is one thing it helps with. So that's the increased performance. But if you're tired, it will also decrease that perception of fatigue. So you can get a little bit better muscle activation, quote unquote, it'll wake up your muscles. But also too, if you're tired, you're going to be able to kind of push through that feelings of being tired. On top of that, mental performance. Obviously, if you are more kind of alert and focused, caffeine can definitely help with this, and that can help with all your tasks throughout the day, all those mental clarity tasks you work through. Improved bowel movements. So you might notice when you take some caffeine or coffee in the morning, you have a little bit of GI distress. And this is because caffeine can actually kind of help stimulate some of the smooth muscle in your GI system, your small intestine, or your colon, and it actually stimulates it. So when it stimulates it, it helps to basically push that poop through the rest of the body, which will, of course, help you improve your bowel movements. So I love having coffee specifically for this reason. It's one of the things that can help keep me regular, of course, in addition to getting lots of fiber and drinking water too. But it increases your overall bowel movements, similar to the reason why it actually helps to increase performance. That calcium that caffeine can kind of help to promote and push into the muscle, not only is your skeletal muscle, it's for all the muscle. Your cardiac muscle, your heart, your smooth muscle, as in your digestive system. So lots of different things there. Also, there could be some improved liver health. This was kind of something cool that I found when I was looking in the research, in that some of the scarring that can happen from different types of liver damage kind of gets blunted to some degree with caffeine intake. And this is still kind of being researched a little bit, but just know if you're having kind of moderate caffeine intake, it could help your liver just a little bit. Decreased asthma complications. So there's a lot of smooth muscle in your lungs that needs to be opened every time you take a big breath in. And since we just discussed that smooth muscle can be stimulated to be opened better, in addition to all the muscle gets fired better. That can help with asthma complications a little bit. Now, I'm not saying you should go take a bunch of it instead of taking your inhaler, if you're somebody who just take an inhaler, but it is something to consider, could help. It could lower your risk of gallstones at all, so if you are somebody who struggles with that as well. And also weight management. This is kind of a few different aspects. It does somewhat increase your metabolism a very tiny bit, but it isn't really noticeable to a very large extent, as in you may be able to burn a little bit more energy from consuming caffeine, but it isn't a huge source that will help to leave you to a lot of weight loss. The weight management aspect of this that could help with weight loss is basically due to the increased performance. So obviously the harder you can work out, the longer you can work out, the better you are going to have workouts, and the more consistent and better your workouts are, of course, you are going to be able to monitor your weight much better. Also, another really cool thing about caffeine is that it kind of blunts your hunger signals a little bit. So a lot of people notice when they're trying to diet, if you will just take a little bit of coffee or a little bit of caffeine, maybe you had an energy drink, especially ones that are carbonated, those are really bubbly. Any type of caffeine though, period, will blunt your hunger. So if you are really, really struggling on a diet and trying to lose weight, again, do not use this. Do not abuse this. It could cause some huge issues, as we discussed earlier in the podcast, but you can use it sparingly, kind of as a tool. I practice intermittent fasting, where I usually eat my first meal between about 10:30 to 11, sometimes a little bit later. And I will actually use caffeine before that to kind of help blunt my hunger a little bit, to help to make sure I can actually get to that end of the fast. So it can be a great tool for you to use for yourself for that, especially with weight management. And those are a lot of different things. And if you are finding value from this, either on the live stream or on the recording, please consider giving this stream a like. It greatly helps to spread the message of inclusive fitness to individuals of all abilities and get this good health knowledge out there. The next portion of this podcast I wanted to dive into is the best caffeine sources. There are a lot of sources of caffeine out there. We're going to go through a few of them here. One of the ones that is so widely used and people really love it, I love it, this is my favorite source of caffeine too, is coffee. And the thing about coffee too, I do want to make known is this isn't to go give you permission to go buy a Starbucks drink that has a bunch of sugar and extra fat and extra empty calories added to it, thinking like, oh, I'm gonna get all these health benefits from coffee. This is from black coffee. That's what I drink. Sometimes I'll maybe toss a little bit of low-calorie sweetener in there, but I pretty much just drink it black. I really enjoy it. So coffee is one of the best natural sources of caffeine that you can get out there. In addition to this, tea is another great source of caffeine. The thing about tea is that in about 6 to 8 ounces, you're going to get about 40 to 50 milligrams of caffeine, maybe a little bit less depending on which type of tea you're drinking. Green tea has a little bit less caffeine. Coffee too, I should go back to that. 8 ounces of coffee has roughly 70 to 100 milligrams, again, of caffeine, depending on kind of what source you're getting, how strong it is, how long you're letting it stoop or kind of brew. That can depend on how much caffeine it is. I believe cold brew coffee actually does have more caffeine in it as well. Espressos, of course, that's kind of a different type of coffee, but all kind of coming from the same type of bean. Something for you to consider. Another source of caffeine that's actually natural is from a food. That's dark chocolate. And this is kind of cool. It's not going to give you a lot of caffeine, so I wouldn't be consuming that, before a workout thinking, I'm just going to pound this dark chocolate to get some good pre-workout in. That really isn't the case. But dark chocolate does have a little bit of caffeine in it. In addition to this, guarana is actually a seed from a plant, of course, that's found in, I believe it's South Africa or Brazil and South Africa. It's someplace in the southern hemisphere. Guarana, it actually has a very potent effect. And if you're drinking guarana or you're taking it, usually this will be added into a energy drink. Guarana has about 4 times the kind of potency of just like a normal caffeine pill. So kind of be careful with guarana because it can be very, very potent. And you'll notice in a lot of those energy drinks that have like 300 milligrams of caffeine in them, or like 5-hour energies, those different things, they might have guarana in it. So realize that this basically is caffeine. So kind of be careful. Some other sources of this is pills. People don't realize you can get on Amazon right now and go buy caffeine pills. You can also buy caffeine powders. And if you are using these things, be very, very careful because the amount of caffeine that you're getting is a very high dose from what you would get in like a cup of coffee, maybe even something like an energy drink. These are very, very basically potent sources of caffeine. So be careful if you are taking those. As I discussed, energy drinks, people know these. It could usually have guarana. Some of these have green tea extract in them, which is kind of a source of caffeine. It might just have regular caffeine added to it. There's a lot of different things usually added into these energy drinks that is directly caffeine and also kind of byproducts of caffeine. So like green tea extract, guarana, all these things too. Soda has some caffeine in it. This usually isn't a lot, but it can vary widely depending on the different sodas. And this is something that I think is very fascinating. So let's give an example of a can of Pepsi. A can of Pepsi has about 34 milligrams of caffeine in it. If you do something like Mountain Dew, for example, Mountain Dew actually has about 54 milligrams of caffeine per overall can. So different sodas have different caffeine. Some sodas don't have any caffeine. Sprite, Dr. Pepper, lemonade, that's not really a soda, orange soda, none of those have caffeine in them, but a lot of them do. So if you're trying to monitor your overall caffeine intake, definitely look at your sodas, look at the back of them. It actually tells you how much is on there, and everything is going to be a little different. Also too, there's some of those kind of bubbly drinks. So like the ice drinks, I really like those. They're sparkling drinks. Carbonated, those actually sometimes have caffeine in them, not all the time. It depends on which ones you buy. Some of them you can clearly see it says caffeine on it, so just be aware of that if you are consuming these sources. Also too, I did want to put in kind of food supplements. There is some foods beyond dark chocolate. So dark chocolate is natural, but there are some foods where they literally add caffeine to it. Specifically some like energy bars. I know Cliff bars, actually some of them have caffeine added to them. There's some food that they literally add caffeine to just for fun. I know sometimes you can actually get like gummies too. Gummies and little, it's like Slurpee pouches. They're from Gatorade. They're really neat. Look these things up, but these are just other forms of different types of ways you can get caffeine. So if you're somebody who's like trying to optimize performance, looking into some of those supplements might be good, especially if you're like in the middle of a race. But there's a lot of different sources of caffeine out there. And hopefully this gives you some good context on some of the things you might want to be aware of too when it comes to your overall caffeine consumption. And speaking of caffeine consumption, let's now talk about how much caffeine you should consume in a day. Now, I just discussed a little bit about some of the different sources, but let's look again at caffeine in our lives and how much caffeine is in different things. Coffee in itself, usually in an 8-ounce cup, has about 70 to 100 milligrams of caffeine per cup. Tea, depending on what type of tea you get, green tea is going to have a little less, black tea a little bit more, is usually going to have about 30 to 50 milligrams per 8 ounces of caffeine, or 8 ounces of fluid, I should say, will have 30 to 50 milligrams of caffeine. Espresso, this could be something 100 to 150 milligrams per 8 ounces. Actually, sometimes even 6 ounces. Espresso is very, very potent. In addition to this, kind of tagging along that, cold brew coffee actually has more caffeine in it. Just the way it's brewed, caffeine stays within it longer. Energy drinks can have 100 milligrams of caffeine, all the way up to 300 milligrams of caffeine. Something like a Monster, usually like a normal sized Monster, is going to have about 160 to 140 milligrams. And then something like a Bang, that's the first one that comes to my mind. That's an energy drink. Some of those other ones too, C4 drinks, can have 200 to all the way up to 300 milligrams of caffeine, which is a lot of caffeine. If you consider it, that's 3 cups of coffee you're almost taking in one big slurp. Soda is also another source of caffeine, and different sodas can have different caffeine contents. There's some sodas that actually don't have any caffeine at all. So, orange sodas, root beers, Sprites, those don't have any caffeine. And then let's say Pepsi, for example, a can of Pepsi has about 34 milligrams of caffeine. And then something like Mountain Dew actually has about 54, sometimes upwards of 60 milligrams of caffeine per can. All types of different sodas have different caffeines. The reason I'm describing all of this is I want you to realize that there is a lot of different things that have caffeine in them. So if you're looking at the optimal recommendations, it goes beyond your cup of coffee in the morning. There's probably some other stuff you're consuming as well. When you're just starting off, I usually recommend individuals to start with about 50 to 100 milligrams of caffeine per day. This is just a rough ballpark. And I should also say too, you don't need to have caffeine, period. If you feel good throughout the day, don't feel like you need to take it. This is just kind of for some extra alertness, extra pick-me-up. Don't feel like you need it. But if you're just starting out, that 50 milligrams to 100 milligrams, basically 1 cup of coffee or maybe 1 cup of tea is a good starting point. See how that feels for you, because it's going to be very dependent on each individual, how well they tolerate coffee. Beyond that, you can get into general, more specific recommendations of 3 to 6 milligrams per kilogram of body weight. So let's talk about somebody who's 180 pounds or 81 kilograms. If you did the math, this would bring you to about 243 milligrams to 486 milligrams of caffeine is kind of that quote unquote safe range for daily use. You can actually get higher than this if you're going for performance, but for most people, I wouldn't recommend that. As we discussed earlier in the podcast, there's a lot of issues that can lead, have you come from drinking a super large amount. So when you're first starting out, go towards that lower end and basically just work your ways up and see kind of what works for you. Your caffeine tolerance will largely depend on how much you should be consuming per day, depending on what your desired goals are. So if your desired goals are just some of the health benefits, maybe just from drinking coffee, or some of the alertness benefits from caffeine itself, you're going to need a very small amount to get that desired effect. And this desired effect, although it is prevalent, it is noted, it isn't like crazy. It isn't like magic, right? If you are somebody who's trying to optimize performance rather, you might want to do a little bit more caffeine simply because your goals are a little bit different. When we're talking about how long it actually takes till you feel an effect, caffeine in itself usually takes about 30 minutes to an hour to actually get into your system. If you're taking it, let's see, through like mouth, so you're drinking it, and it can actually be absorbed pretty darn quickly, sometimes even 15 to 30 minutes if you don't have anything in your food. So if you're taking this before you want to do something where you want to get the effects of caffeine, I'd recommend about 30 minutes at least. If you don't have anything in your stomach, 15 minutes will actually get it in there pretty quickly. Otherwise, if you have food in your stomach, realize it'll probably be about an hour before you get the full alertness effects of caffeine. So that gives you a general guideline of how much caffeine you should take throughout the day. And when we're taking caffeine, one of the things that people always ask me about is if it really helps with weight loss. Does caffeine help you lose weight? And it could to some degree. So let's talk about how it may help you lose weight. One of the things it can do to help you lose weight is it can actually increase your metabolic rate. And this is very, very slightly. I don't want people to start drinking a bunch of coffee or caffeine and think that like, oh, it's just gonna skyrocket my metabolism and it's gonna help me burn all this fat. It helps to a very small degree. It does help. It is noticeable and it is there, but it's a very, very small degree. Perhaps a bigger effect that caffeine can have on you is the fact that it is a hunger suppressant. So when you take in caffeine, it can actually kind of blunt some of the hunger signals in your overall body from basically telling you, hey, it's time to eat, I'm hungry. I use caffeine every now and again, specifically coffee is usually my form of caffeine that I usually take in. I love coffee as a medium or a source of it. I usually will take some coffee if I'm trying to diet or simply just not eat quite yet, and that will blunt my hunger usually for at least another hour to an hour and a half before I get very, very hungry again. So it can be used as a hunger suppressant in your overall diet. There is also lots of research on the fact that it will improve your performance in the gym, and this can be done through improved energy, or at least perception of energy. When it comes to drinking caffeine, it blocks your adenosine receptors, which basically tells your body that it's tired. So you're blocking the receptors that say, hey, I'm tired, which gives you this perception of more energy. You don't really have actually more energy, but sometimes mind over matter, those things help. So it can push you a little bit further in the gym. It will actually help to increase your performance because it can kind of, what happens with caffeine is it actually releases more calcium into your blood, which could then be, of course, be used in your muscles. So your muscles need to have a certain amount of calcium ions to fire properly, and caffeine can kind of help dump those out there more readily, which can help, of course, with performance, which, long story short, is leading to better weight loss goals. Also, too, some people just like the feeling of a light buzz when they're going to work out, and caffeine can help that. Caffeine can help with that. So just increased enjoyment overall. I know I love having just some coffee with my pre-workout meal before I actually go to the gym to lose weight. So it's kind of part of the feedback is that it's just very enjoyable for me too. So caffeine can assist in weight loss. It's highly researched. So we do know from a lot of different studies that caffeine helps in a large abundance of domains: power output, endurance. Obviously, if your perception of fatigue is down, it can help you to push a little bit further in the gym as well, get a couple more reps. Those are all very crucial. And the thing about caffeine is that it's very cheap. If you're getting pre-workouts, those are a little more expensive, but caffeine in itself is actually very, very cheap. So something that I would recommend if you're trying to get the most out of your workouts and weight loss, you could get a little bit of caffeine in your diet. And another thing that I wanted to talk about, and this is kind of a funny one, but I think it's important because it tells us what caffeine does, is talk about why caffeine, or coffee specifically, makes us poop. So coffee has caffeine in it. That's the first thing I want you to realize. Coffee has caffeine. So it isn't the fact that usually coffee is what's making you poop. But caffeine, one thing it actually does is it wakes your muscles up. And this is by readily dumping calcium ions into your blood and body, which can kind of tell your muscles, hey, it's time to fire and get ready. This helps with muscular contraction, not only for your skeletal muscle or the muscle you control, but also the muscle in your gut. Your small intestine and large intestine has a bunch of muscles that help to push basically the poop or the waste through your body, through your GI system. So it's stimulating the smooth muscle, which is ultimately why it helps you to become more regular. So if you are somebody who drinks your morning cup of coffee and you're like, man, it's that time of day or my stomach hurts, that's exactly why. It isn't because of the coffee, it's from the caffeine. You would notice the same effects if you had an energy drink, if you took some caffeine supplements or different types of pills. All those different things are reasons, or I guess ways that you could basically poop more. So before we get into this next portion, I do want to say, if you are finding value from this, please consider liking the stream. Once again, we're trying to spread the message of inclusive fitness and health to individuals of all abilities, get some good health knowledge out there to everyone. So the last thing I wanted to discuss is caffeine and sleep. And specifically, how does caffeine affect sleep? We've talked about this a little bit earlier in the podcast, but I kind of want to go back into it 100% through because there's a few different things and ways that caffeine can be really, really affecting your sleep. And the first way that caffeine can be affecting your sleep is the blocking of adenosine. Now, adenosine is a byproduct that builds up from cell metabolism. If you aren't familiar with cell metabolism, your body uses ATP, which is adenosine triphosphate. This is actually made in our cells, in the mitochondria of cells, through lots of different processes. But basically, we get ATP, triphosphate, adenosine triphosphate. When we use that phosphate, there's the byproduct of adenosine from the day. So all these different things we do, maybe we go to the grocery store, we go to work, that uses ATP. The phosphate, that's energy that gets used, but the adenosine just sits in your body. Just sits in your body. And what happens when that adenosine sits in your body is that it basically tells you, I'm getting more tired. I'm building up all this adenosine. So adenosine in itself makes you feel more tired. It kind of helps to promote overall feelings of sleepiness and tiredness. When we go to bed at night, adenosine clears out of our body. It clears out of our body. So in the morning, most of the adenosine is completely cleared, about 80%. But there does need to be about an hour to maybe 2 hours after you wake up where your adenosine, there's still about 20% left in your body, still a little bit of tiredness and sleepiness. This is part of the reason we feel groggy, is there's still a little bit of that adenosine actually in our body. This needs to be fully cleared. And if you take in caffeine, this actually will blunt the effects of adenosine. But the thing is, it doesn't get rid of the adenosine. So in the morning, say you wake up and you have some coffee, 1 hour, 30 minutes to an hour after you wake up, you are blocking the adenosine not only from it doing anything, so making you feel tired, you're also blocking it completely from getting rid of your body, from getting basically excreted and launched out of your body, right? But the thing about this is that the adenosine is still there. The adenosine is still there, so it needs to come back over time. This is why a lot of times people will have that afternoon slump later in the day, is because they're taking caffeine too early. They blunt that adenosine from getting basically fully ridded from their body. And as we discussed earlier in the podcast, the half-life of caffeine is 6 hours. So if you take 100 milligrams, let's say 200 milligrams, that's about 2 cups of coffee, maybe a little bit under, but a little bit over, but 160 to 200 milligrams of coffee. You take that at 7 a.m. when you wake up in the morning. 6 hours later, 100 milligrams of coffee or caffeine from coffee, potentially, if that's what you're drinking in the morning, is still going to be in your bloodstream. That's usually when people feel that afternoon slump. In addition, usually people will have a very high carb lunch, which spikes their insulin. So there's kind of a lot of things that lead to this afternoon slump, but that caffeine right after you wake up is 100% one of the reasons. You are not allowing that adenosine to fully clear up. So what I recommend to people, although it is tough and although it is tricky, I recommend to try to not have caffeine right after they wake up. Wait about 90 minutes to 2 hours after they wake up, as this fully allows adenosine to clear from your body, which can ultimately lead you to better energy throughout the day. And then it'll also allow you to not only have better energy, but that adenosine won't be pushed to later in the day to make you feel tired, to make you sleep, and then just lead to this never-ending cycle of I need caffeine to wake me up in the morning, but it's messing with my adenosine, which makes me tired, so then I need to sleep, but then you get the picture. It's a never-ending cycle. Another way that caffeine actually affects sleep is sleep itself. And you probably heard the person that has said, maybe even you have said, I can fall asleep just fine. I have no issues with intaking caffeine or coffee right before I sleep. This may be true, especially if your tolerance is okay, as in like you don't feel the effects of caffeine very, very well. You probably can. But the thing about this is that caffeine actually affects your overall sleep quality. So you may be able to fall asleep fine, but the actual quality of your sleep is not as good. For example, if you go to bed and you drink some coffee right before you're sleeping and you sleep 8 hours, the actual quality of your sleep is going to go down. You might be a little more restless. You might toss and turn more. You might not get as restorative of sleep because even though you fell asleep and it feels like you're sleeping fine, you're going to be a little more agitated. Also, there's some stuff that happens in the brain where your body is just simply not going to be able to go through all the different cycles of good, high quality sleep it needs. So your sleep's not going to be as restorative versus if you just had 8 hours of normal sleep with no coffee or caffeine before, guess what? It's going to be a lot better. So if you have coffee or caffeine before you sleep, you might have 8 hours of time in bed, but only 6 hours of sleep, versus if you had 8 hours in bed without coffee, you might be getting 7 good hours of sleep. So just something to consider. And of course, this will affect the next day. You're tired, you have decreased mental clarity, you're not going to be able to focus as well. You're not going to be able to perform in your activities of daily life, or of course, working out in the gym. If you do like working out, you're not going to be able to work out as well, which can lead to you not doing workouts and skipping them, which has its own set of consequences that we all know. You might lead yourself to grabbing more coffee, which seems good at the time, but the tiredness that you have is, again, just as we described, that adenosine still hasn't fully cleared. So you're just blunting the adenosine again. Again, you're feeling more energetic, but the adenosine isn't clearing from your body. So then it's going to be pushed back even later. So then you get tired even later, take more coffee, potentially right before bed because you needed it to get through the day, and then it messes with your sleep. It really, really is a never-ending cycle. And I want to go back to this idea of half-life again. The half-life of caffeine is 6 hours. So if you are consuming coffee, caffeine, I keep saying coffee. Coffee is one of the most widely used sources of caffeine out there. If you are taking some coffee or caffeine at noon, guess what? 6 hours later, half of what you took will be in your body. 12 hours later, a quarter of it will still be in your body. So if you drink 200 milligrams of caffeine, say you have an energy drink at noon, 100 milligrams will be at 6 p.m. and then 50 milligrams will be at midnight. So pretty crazy stuff there. Pretty crazy stuff when you're thinking about your overall consumption at all. And hopefully this gives you some good context into how it affects your sleep and how it could also affect your mental energy, and clarity throughout the rest of the day. Because if you know this, you can really play and use caffeine to your advantage to kind of help you wake up a little bit, spike that cortisol, but also not use it too late in the day where it's messing with you for the rest of the day. So caffeine can be used. It actually can help your sleep, but the way most people use caffeine, it's not a good story. So thanks so much for joining this stream today. Like the video if this helped. Subscribe to the channel as we make videos helping individuals of all abilities inside the gym and become healthier in life. I'm going to link another video down in the pinned comment that you also might enjoy. Otherwise, we'll see you next